I'm getting my phone.
Okay, so I'll do my intro again, maybe a bit quicker this time. So I'm editor of HRZone, and as a site community, we are concerned with tracking the future of the workplace, the future of the HR profession, and providing people with the content they need in the form of articles, emails, downloads, case studies that helps them do their jobs more effectively today and into the future. So check us out. Yeah. And you're back.
And I'm back, exactly. And I'm going to text Cathy and say, where are you? And then I will say who I am.
Great.
So here we go, Cathy.
So while you're doing that, I've got some quite a bit of ideas for today. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. Yeah, I had a think on the bus in, and I had a think at my desk this morning as well.
That's very good. Well, I have done a few notes as well. I have prepared slightly, so that's jolly good. Although this has come about, so I'm Jo Dodds, and I'm a social engagement consultant, but I also work with Engage for Success. I do a day a week within the core team, and Cathy, hopefully our exec director, will be joining us shortly. But this came about because we were at the CIPD conference together. Was it last week?
Yeah, it was last week. Yes, time flies.
Exactly. And we had a coffee with your colleague Fiona as well, didn't we?
Yep.
And we got chatting about employee engagement, some of the things that had come up in the presentations we'd been to. And it was just really interesting conversation. And then we were talking about Blab, and you were saying you'd like to do a Blab, and we said, so would we. Why don't we get together and recreate the conversation, which is never a good plan because it won't be the same conversation.
No, I know, no, fall from grace, I know, but we can try. It was quite spontaneous, you're right. We kind of launched into the whole, do you know what, how can we just make engagement happen quickly? What are the things that frustrate people in the office every day? How can we fix them? The simple formula, isn't it? That was a good conversation. Well, hopefully we can recreate some of those simple ideas that we were talking about then. A lot of them are easy as well, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly right. I've just had a message from Cathy to say that she's waiting for people to join, and I think that's because I changed the time at the last minute. She was probably really organised and got in there before I did, so she'll refresh, and then she'll come along. So we were sort of just talking generally about, how sometimes there's just really simple things that you can do. Oh, here she comes. Hang on.
Is she in now?
She is, yes. We'll say hello to her before we go any further.
Hello. Can anybody hear me?
Hello.
Oh, yes. Hi, Cathy.
Hello, you all right?
I am.
Good. So I'm going to leave the other seat open in case anyone does want to jump in and join in with us, because that would be quite exciting.
Yeah, that'd be good.
We have got a couple of people I've seen just have sort of joined to watch. So we've done our intros, Cathy. You might want to do a little bit about you, and then we've explained about the positioning of why we're here today, and then we'll just sort of carry on talking about our employee engagement thoughts. But just quickly say who you are.
Yes, indeed. I'm Cathy, and I'm the Exec Director for Engage for Success. And I love Twitter, I love technology, I love all of the different ways that we can get together and share our engagement thoughts, our productivity thoughts, whatever it is that makes us work better as teams.
Cool, thank you. And we were saying about this has come about because we had a chat last week over coffee at the CIPD conference, and that we've had a think about things we want to talk about, but we're hoping some of the points we brought up last week will come up. But, as is the way, I couldn't even remember half of what we talked about, could I, when we were planning this? So there we go. So, we were just starting to say how, sometimes you sort of think employee engagement, needs to be very formal and, programs and, stuff. And our conversation really was about how sometimes there's really little things that really make a big difference within teams. And we were sharing some of the things that we do within the Engage for Success team to engage. And one of the first ones that we talked about is we use a tool called 15.5 to do a little update each week to each other as to what we have been doing. And it's based on a theory from about 30 years ago, a management thing about write me a report in 15 minutes that will just take me 5 minutes to read.
I like that.
And we can all, sort of get up to speed very quickly. And what we've found with our team is actually the benefit of that is our weekly calls on a Friday, instead of it being a round robin, tell us what you've been doing today, and everyone sort of going through the drudgery of a week of activity, some of which is very interesting, but actually we don't really need to sort of go through in lots of detail. We don't do that now because it's all covered off through that reporting. And actually what we do on a Friday is chat about either the weekend and what we're all doing to build our relationships. But quite often it's things like we've been to a conference, we heard a great speaker, I've learned this, this happened. So they're actually conversations where you can spend a lot more time talking in a lot more detail about stuff that's much more useful and interesting and is learning for people, rather than sort of wasting most of the meeting in effect talking about objectives and stuff that we've done, when we can find that out in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I think part of the reason that it's worked so well is because we all make a commitment. We make a commitment to go and fill it in, pretty much come hell or high water. And we make a commitment to read and comment on and engage with what everybody else has put down as well. And, we live in the real world. It doesn't always happen, but for the most part, it does happen. Mm. And I think that's actually a really strong part of it as well, is we know that the rest of the team will pay attention to what we've taken the time to write down there. And quite often some of those great conversations come up from just one thing that somebody's put in their 15.5 that's really struck a chord with somebody else on the team.
I think this comes back to effectiveness in some regard, because I was thinking about this, and it's kind of an action oriented thing. You know what you need to do, so you don't need to take brain power thinking about what it is you need to do. And we've tried to run meetings in that regard, in where you have a clear agenda and you have a clear chair, because people say, you act as the chair but people don't feel they.
Oh, I've lost him.
Yes.
Well, that's very spooky.
That's silence. Oh dear.
I think there was a mandate.
Yeah, Jamie, come back. Oh, hang on, he might be coming back. I was just sitting there thinking, oh no, somebody's cleaning the windows. It's going to be really noisy. And I've now remembered I haven't unplugged my phone either. So I'm very unprofessionally, in a minute when Jamie's come back and we can stop talking, I'm going to dash over and unplug my phone. I hardly get any calls, but they'll come through today, won't they?
Yes. But what Jamie was saying was actually quite applicable to another thing that we do on the team as well, that we briefly discussed. And this came up a little while ago from a conversation that I had with one of our wicked thinkers, Mark McCurgo. And we were talking about meetings and how ineffective they can be and how do we manage them better, and all of those good bits around engagement of how do we actually allow people to make their own decisions about whether or not attending a meeting is actually good for them and is useful. And we came up with a little tool, which we will link to from the Engage for Success website. Mark went away with some friends of his and did some work. And it's around actually having a charter for optional meetings.
Yeah.
And so our Friday call, which is the one that we're referring to there, where we discuss 15.5 or the weekend or whatever it is, every other week is completely optional for any member of the team, and there's no comeback. I don't chase people as to whether or not they're on it. They make their own decisions as to whether or not it's a really good use of their time to be on it. And we have just a set of really simple guidelines which we can really make available to people about the organizer. Obviously the meeting itself needs to be clear.
Yeah.
Hi, Jamie.
Hey, sorry, did I just drop out?
Yeah.
Carried on talking. I thought I was going to let it in. So, that's a shame.
Right, it was very disconcerting because you just froze. It was very.
I was overwhelmed by the idea. That was the thing.
Yes.
I
picked up your point.
I picked up the point, and I was talking about the optional meeting tack that we take with our weekly calls, our Friday calls with the team. And so there's a little charter that we'll pop on the Engage for Success site and spread around again. And it is quite simply being clear about what the meeting is, so that people can make an informed judgment about whether or not it's good for them to dial in or be there or whatever it is. And it's about a commitment. It's me saying, I will be clear about the meeting. This is what it's for. This is what the content is. And it's other people then saying, well, actually, I don't need to be there, and I will therefore not attend, but I will let you know, and I will make sure that that's all done. Or absolutely, yes, I need to be there for that one, and I will then attend, and I will be fully present. And we do that every other week with our regular call on a Friday. So every other week, when we haven't had a face-to-face team meeting, it's entirely optional for any members of the team to attend that or not. I will be there. I will dial in,
Yeah.
and if anybody wants to dial in and connect and whatever else they can, but they absolutely entirely make the decision as to whether or not it's a good use of their time.
Yeah, it's empowerment over meetings, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So Jamie, what were you saying?
What did you hear up to?
In the middle, you were about to say mandate, I think.
Right, okay, yeah. So people having a mandate for chairing a meeting and having the confidence to chair the meeting, I think is really important. And also, one of the things that we've tried to do recently is working out what logic or what sort of arguments or what end goal we're trying to go for a meeting. So say we have a new design for something up, it's very easy to get into opinions, and it's like, well, I think this, I think that, and it's like, well, to what end goal that we're trying to achieve do you think that for? And I think that's actually quite empowering and engaging, because then people don't feel the need to just sort of come up with opinions because they have to and because that's the aim of the meeting. People actually feel that they can offer their opinion based on, actual reasoning rather than perhaps personality or who's got the loudest voice or something. It's quite democratizing, I think.
There's a big recognition there as well, isn't there, of people's different approaches and whether that's learning styles or input styles or anything else, because obviously some people need information up front if they're going to contribute in a meeting, because they need to think about it, they need to reflect, and they're often not comfortable in a sort of very free-flowing conversation. I mean, the three of us are all fairly robust people who can manage a three-way conversation like we're having now, and we don't mind a bit of talking over each other, and Joe will tell me to shut up and it'll all be good. Some people just that will not bring out the best in them in that environment. As you say, it's about empowerment and being allowed to be yourself, and then the environment actually making that work for you. I
was having a discussion with little Doddsy this morning, who's 9, and their school have this phrase that she'd said the other week about treating everybody as you'd like to be treated yourself. And I tried to have a conversation with her on a walk we were having the other day about the fact that we talk in the movement, David talks about it a lot as well, that it should be about treating people as they would like to be treated, not necessarily as you would like to be treated.
Very
true.
She was
disagreeing with me because clearly it's an important sort of value in their school. And I was trying to say, that's not wrong, and I don't disagree that they say that. However, if you actually think about that and how that plays out in reality, and I was trying to, give her an example and say, if this is what we were doing and I did that, in this case, I was saying, if I kept hassling you every 2 minutes to get you out the door in the morning, because that's what I thought I would need, because I forget what the time is and I let it go and then I'm late. If I needed someone to keep doing that with me, I might do that with her. But actually, if she doesn't like that, she'll just find that really irritating and really, it would demonstrate that to her that I didn't trust her, even though it wasn't about not trusting her. It was about needing it myself and therefore giving it to her. And it's funny because I don't think she's got it, and I think it's going to be a bit of an ongoing conversation. But that's so true, isn't it?
It's a great point. It's a great point, and I think it's one more win for engagement is every time you get frustrated communicating with other people, possibly there's a clash of learning, styles or approaches or anything like that. And actually, this is a bit of a tangent, but just off that phrase, I also have a problem when in toilets you see the phrase "leave the toilet as you found it." You've been into some terrible toilets that I wouldn't want to leave it like that. So exactly the same thing.
You could have used the countryside code. That would have been a cleaner version of that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
As you found it may or may not work depending on whether the last person did it right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But we'll go with the toilets. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. And just going off the meetings as well, one of the things we talked about in our original coffee was the idea of taking meetings away from the circular meeting room where everyone's sat.
Yeah.
And I mean, we go out for walks sometimes around the block, kind of walk and talk meeting. The only problem we find is that taking notes is hard, but if you record it or something, it really is about, you're engaged, your body's walking around, you actually feel engaged. That's a really nice way to shake things up.
Yeah,
it is. We quite often do it in our face-to-face team meetings. So they generally last about 4 hours. We do them 11 till 3 every other Wednesday. And where we've got a good sort of contingent of us actually all there face to face, rather than having people on the phone, which we have as well, we quite often, there's a little park just opposite the office that we normally meet in, and we'll quite often go, and because we tend to do a working lunch, we'll go and get sandwiches and come back. If it's nice enough, we'll go and do that in the park, and that's really quite fun. Or we just take people, just say, right, now we're going to get up and we're going to walk and we're going to go out, and it's just going to be different. And it's amazing how much it shakes things up. And in fact, the last time we did it, well, I think we did a very strange role play in that park, didn't we?
Well, they all went off somewhere else first. They went to the wrong park, didn't they? And we were standing there going, "They're over there. Well, come here."
And then we got the team we'd recently done a really great morning with. It was a colour personality type thing, and we'd all been divided up into our various colours. So Joe and I are very yellow, and we have some red people on the team, and some blue and some green. And we got people to replay one of the scenarios that we'd been talking about and discussing as different colours. So it was you're very yellow. How would you do that if you were a red?
That's a great exercise. That is.
It was such good fun. It really was. Everybody in the park was just staring at us because we were all collapsing in laughter. Yeah. But it was really effective.
But that's really back to what we were just saying about understanding other people, because that's what that exercise that we did with Giles from Insights about the colours. It was about, this is what you're like, but everyone, other people are different. And if you speak to them in the way that you want to be spoken to, you'll, either annoy them or they just won't get it, or, whatever. And so it's about understanding that sort of difference. And we were laughing, weren't we? Because we had to do a little exercise to plan a village fair in our colours. And Cathy and I, as she said, a yellow. Don't know what I just knocked on the floor. So everyone else was, getting down to it, really, planning their thing and everything else. And Giles said afterwards, we spent the first 10 minutes talking about the fact that I was writing with a green pen and how we both used to write in green at school. And we chat. And then we dashed off a quick plan at the end that was all, very sort of, effervescent.
And Morris dancers and Italian. And at the bottom, I'd written, we must work out how to fund this somehow.
So it was a really good illustration of the differences, because, we had the red people who were very, you're going to do it this way, and, you must do that. And, oh, look, we've lost Jamie again. So that was
horrified at the mention of Morris dancing, clearly.
I know, that obviously put him off, yes. He's coming back in again. He must have a dodgy connection, as they say.
Sorry, guys, terrible connection. I don't know what the problem is. Terrible.
I thought you were offended by my mention of Morris dancing.
No, I'm a fan. I'm always at the Sidmouth Folk Festival. Don't know.
Somebody's calling in. Somebody's calling in. Let's so it's Syed, I think. Let's see. Hello.
Hello, Syed.
Hello. So you say you're a civil engineer, is that right?
Yeah. How do you know?
It says on your profile. It says on your profile. So, how engaging is your workplace?
What?
How engaging is your workplace?
Yeah, I'm still a student. I'm not into professional career.
So, how engaging is your is your college or university then?
No, it's my pre-final semester, and the workload is not very much. We study only 5 or 6 days before exams, and the rest is practical knowledge. Yeah, so it's quite enjoying. What?
What are your professors like? Are they engaging? Lecturers?
Our professors engage us in a lot of projects. They give us projects, assignments, and there are a lot of things they engage us in.
Mm-hmm.
What's their style? What's their style of talking and lecturing?
The lecturing is done in English language.
Where are you? Where are you based?
What?
Where do you live? Where are you?
I'm from India.
Okay, cool. So it's all in English. And how do they actually get you all interested in the topic at the lesson? What sort of things do they do?
Actually, the professors teach what is according to the course, what is inside the syllabus. And despite from the syllabus, there are tutorial lectures, problems solving lectures, and they engage us in a lot of such things.
And is it an engineering degree?
What?
What are you studying?
Yeah, I'm studying civil engineering. You're talking about my course? Yes. What do I study in my course?
Yeah.
It's strength of materials and structural analysis, design of structures, geotechnical engineering, environmental engineering, water resource engineering, and apart from that, seismic engineering, geology.
Straight over my head.
Yeah. And do they ever mention when you're in the workplace how you'll work with people and about management or anything like that?
Yeah, there are also courses of management, of economics and engineering, and humanities. There are also I studied such courses in, I think, 3 semesters. There was 3 such courses, that were not related to engineering. Yes.
So just interesting to see if they talk very much about employee engagement, which is what we're talking about today.
Yeah,
what?
in theory.
Employee
engagement. Have you heard the term?
Employee engagement? Yeah, I think that I think that it means that how you engage your employees.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is what you're talking about.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, as I was telling you that they engage us with a lot of assignments and a lot of projects, a lot of there are new things coming up. There are a lot of competitions. There are contests like we have to give the innovative designs, innovative ideas. A lot of such things are happening every day, and also sports. There are lots and lots of things in which you can actually get in and get yourself engaged in.
We were just talking about having meetings and walking rather than just sort of staying in a meeting room. And Cathy, we were at an event on Monday, weren't we, where I actually, in the middle of it, thought to myself, I know we did do an exercise at the end where we moved around a bit, but I thought I spend most of my time at a standing desk at home nowadays. And yet when you go to conferences and meetings, you end up sitting down for the whole time. And I thought, that's something that, it'd be interesting to see if that starts to change with all the talk about well-being and how important such things are, whether, we'd get to places where we could sort of actually spend a lot of time standing up at these meetings rather than sitting down. And you talked about your walking meetings, Jamie.
Well, I'd like to see that at conferences. Why can't people stand up, for the keynote? Have a shorter keynote and have people standing up. Change it up a bit. I mean, I'd like a standing desk because there are days when my back just is all tense and like tight and horrible. And what does that do to my productivity on that day? I mean, it's an obvious one, really.
Yes.
It is. No, we see more and more people with them now. And Joe and I have also both done a great walking podcast.
I haven't done mine yet.
Have you not done yours yet?
No.
Up at Leeds Beckett University, and so what they do is the staff get together a couple of lunch times a week, and they do a walk together, normally about 40 minutes to an hour, and then if you go along as a guest, they interview you at the same time, which when they're all a bit taller than you makes you very breathless to keep up. But it's a great idea, and they have about 100 people who will come along at any one point. I mean, the walks are normally about 20 people or so, but obviously they've got a community that enjoy getting involved in it, and the interviews that come out of it are really interesting as well. And what they end up with is people all over the organisation get together that wouldn't normally under any other circumstance get together, and that's where the innovation comes again, because all of a sudden you've got people talking and their ideas bounce off each other, and you've got ideas coming that wouldn't have happened before.
One of the other things I wanted to talk about was we see, workspaces and sort of the opening up of workspaces. So they're open plan and collaborative, and this is the way everyone's going. It's the way the industry is going. It's the way we see as the ideal workplace. But actually, there are quick wins by asking people, what type of workplace do they want to work in? Because not everyone wants to. Oh, right. Wow. I don't know what happened there. So what type of workplace do people actually want to work in? Because, I went to an office recently for a meeting and they had dividers, not big ones, but you had your space. And I don't know, I kind of like the idea of that because sometimes it's so hard to work, in a collaborative, open, loud, workspace where everyone's mixed together. I just wonder if asking people, of course, it's harder to put up dividers, but that is a case for flexible working, I think. And that case has not been made that strongly. It's noisy. It's hard to work here. I'm an introvert. I need some quiet,
And that we were
funny. I'm almost completely the opposite. So I've come up through an office environment. A lot of my history is corporate, and the couple of times that I've formally gone home working, while I was working for BT at the time, I've hated it. And I'm sort of a mixture of extrovert and introvert. I've got both sides to me.
Ambivert.
But actually, absolutely. But I tend to work actually very well in either in an office environment or in the sort of coffee shop environment, because actually what it enables me to do is tune out. But there are people there, and there's a buzz of things going on that I think probably gives me energy. So I actually prefer that way rather than being on my own. But again, it comes back to different styles, don't we?
I've got a tip for you, Cathy. You're going to thank me for this. There's a site called Tivity.com which plays you ambient coffee shop noise. So when you're working from home, put that on, and then you get the best of both worlds.
And Focus at Will, which I've recommended before, has music and stuff, but it also has a coffee shop option as well. It's interesting. I was listening to a productivity podcast the other day, and the lady was saying that when she first left her corporate job, that actually she wasn't being very productive at all at home, and it took her a while to work out that it was exactly that. It was the ambient noise. She said there was stuff happening all around her at home because it was so quiet. Every time anything happened, like a bird tweeted or something outside made a noise, she actually was distracted by it, and she couldn't understand why, because she'd been in a noisy office before. So she said she transitioned into working from home by working in coffee shops a lot for the first year, because she suddenly realized that she couldn't be productive because the environment was so different, and she had to sort of get herself into the groove, if you like. So that's a really key point. And I think to your point, Jamie, about the people being different types of people, liking different environments, and that are when we used to have loads of offices, that didn't suit the people who wanted to go out and talk to people all the time. And, now it's probably the opposite way. But do you remember last week as well, we talked about Kerry Cooper, Professor Sir Kerry Cooper, had said about organisations who were stopping emails. So they were saying, on a Wednesday, you're not emailing at all. And some organisations looking to stop email completely. And then I went to a talk by the chief envisioning, I can't even say it, he's gone again, envisioning officer for Microsoft. And I asked him what he thought about that, because I knew that he didn't agree with it from what he'd already said in his talk. And Kerry was talking about it from a sort of, removing the stress point of view. But what we were saying last week, I think, was that certainly for me, the email side of things is a key way of reducing stress, because I can manage things in my own time when I need to, and you can switch it off if you want to, and all those other things. Now I'm slightly at an advantage, I guess, because I don't, I work on my own mostly. So actually, if I choose to ignore people, then there's no one really going to tell me off other than my customers. But it's interesting that the companies that are saying, let's have an email free day because it'll be less stressful for everyone. I would find that really stressful, because I like my email.
I agree. The problem with an email free day is what happens if half your workforce on that email free day really need to use their email. I just think when everyone's working on totally different things, you can't really do it. However, I did interview a guy who runs a company in the US called Expensify, and every year they spend 2 months, I think it's 2 months, offshoring, they call it. Well, they'll go to, it's typically Burma or the Philippines, something like that, somewhere where they can get good internet. So it is a working sort of, holiday. It's not a holiday, and they sort of chunk their time. So they'll work on projects that typically require creativity and innovation that benefit from you being in a place where you're outside your comfort zone. I think an environment like that, email-free days work, because everyone's working on the same thing. But it's like in the office where people come over to you when you're just in the middle of something and you see them out the corner of your eye and your hands freeze over your keyboard because you're like, I'm going to get taken out of what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. My partner was telling me that when he used to work in an office environment like that, they actually used to have a sign. I mean, I think they had a traffic cone, and it was the traffic cone was on your desk. You didn't.
Yeah. Some people put hats on, baseball caps and things. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, really good visual way of just giving your colleagues a clue of, I need to focus for the next couple of hours.
Don't do it.
Yeah, and then the introverts just put the hat on the whole time.
Yeah. But headphones aren't respected anymore, are they?
No, headphones aren't respected. No, absolutely.
And people, what they'll do is they'll start talking to you when you've got your headphones on. And you're thinking, I can't hear what you're saying. All I can see is your mouth moving. And you take them off, and they're halfway through, and it just becomes awkward.
It's a bit like that when people disappear in the middle of a sentence.
Exactly. Blame the internet. I'll be having words with the IT people. Don't worry.
Exactly. Or send them an email, whichever suits you best.
Exactly. Whatever suits them best, right?
Oh yes, good thinking. So you said you've done some prep on the bus, Jamie. Is there anything else that you wanted to raise?
Yeah, so I've just got my list here of things I wanted to talk about. So one of the wins that we've done is we've just introduced fruit in the workplace, kind of from a well-being angle. But also, one of the things I like about it is it's put in a central place. People have an allowance per week, and people use it as a break to get up, to go and get the fruit. So I really like, when it comes to quick wins for engagement, the unintended consequences of things. Yeah. So the obvious thing is the healthy fruit that goes towards people's 5 a day, whatever. But people will get up and then they'll talk where the fruit is. They'll use it as their break. They'll go and get a piece of fruit and think, oh, I need a break. So they'll go and get a drink as well. So I think those types of wins, you actually get more wins when you implement something very, very direct. And people think, oh, it's direct. It's just the benefit from that. There's no way it is. You get a hell of a lot of benefit from that.
We're going to start talking about fruit bowl moments instead of water cooler moments, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely.
Think fruit is a classic one that I often use when I'm talking to people, though, about the need to make sure that if you're doing something like that it does actually work in your environment and your culture.
Yeah. Because
it's one that can so easily be look what they're doing now. They're putting flipping fruit in the canteen for us. What do they think we are like?
I know.
And it's so easy to. It's a classic for being perceived in perhaps a cynical way.
And well-being, giving them fruit. I use exactly the same example because I do know of a company that does that, whose engagement levels, in my view, are poor, but they do have fruit every day, so every week. So that's good.
And I'm absolutely fascinated to know, because I read about this the other day. Apparently, in a fruit bowl or a mixed fruit bowl or whatever else, people always go for obviously the easy to eat things. So do you always have the oranges left over?
We often have one apple, but I have a theory, and I'm sure there's a PhD student who's tracked this or something, but once one piece of fruit starts going off, it's kind of had it. It's like in the supermarket where people always pick the nice stuff, so the bad stuff sinks to the bottom. But I don't ever pick the stuff like actually, no, I was going to say I don't ever pick like grapes and stuff where there's no skin on them. Yeah. But actually, I do have apples and pears, so that's not. I often have banana. It's
and a whole bunch of grape.
Yeah. Don't know.
Yeah, cool.
We're great believers in cake and engagement at Engagement Success.
Gluten free cake.
Yeah.
Well, no, both sorts are available. Joe and I will do the gluten free. But for instance, yesterday our colleague Mez bought some leftover birthday cake in, which I have to say was both lovely at the team meeting, even though I didn't eat any. But then I took some home, and my stepson has thoroughly enjoyed it. So it's all good. Cake is good.
But I think people's stomachs, feeding people is an underutilized form of quick wins, because if it's like, right, we're going to buy you dinner this evening, not only is you filled someone's stomach with really nice food, they don't have to cook when they get home, so they're in a better mood, they can spend more time with their families, just things like that. I think it's really easy to feed people.
I worked in a family business a few years ago where our head office, there were probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 people in the office. Should have known that. I was the HR manager. But we were sort of in the middle of nowhere. It was probably a car ride to the shop sort of thing. And so the organisation had historically made a decision to stock the kitchen. So I used to go in, grab myself some breakfast and then have my lunch, and felt a bit peckish in the afternoon. Wasn't good for the waistline, but what it did mean is that in some ways, people stayed in the office longer, and that wasn't the cynical reason for doing it. But I don't mean longer in the day. I mean, as in, people wouldn't go out particularly for lunch because they had the food there. Therefore, they didn't sort of take their full lunch break and then overrun because they were in a queue at the supermarket, all those other sort of practical things. But actually, it was more about the sociable aspect of it. You know, you go in and say, "Oh, we're coming to get some breakfast," and off you go to the kitchen and make something together. And it was very, very, you know, sociable and engaging from that point of view. And also, we just felt like the company looked after us, and it didn't cost us that much.
I think indeed, and there's a point there about being careful if you've always provided something and then taking it away. So one of our retail chains had a problem a few years ago because they used to provide tea and coffee in the staff canteens, and they were a supermarket, and in it's sort of staff rooms. They had a coffee machine, and then they took them away for economic reasons. But the effect on staff morale was huge, and they got put back in.
So actually,
really,
the net economy at the end of it was probably a big impact on productivity and all those other things, which
absolutely. So for something so simple, So that, you know, you get into real nuances, I think, of culture and what people expect and how they react to it if you're not careful. I mean, the one place where I know where fruit works incredibly well is Innocent Drinks, who, and then again, you know, part of their culture. You'd perhaps be horrified if that wouldn't work.
Yes, yeah.
I once wrote to them when I was a student saying, "I don't have any story, but please could you send me a box of drinks?" And they did. So cheeky. I would never do that.
What are you like?
One of the most engaging things I think they did when I was we went to see them there. I passed the original launch sort of support network for Engage for Success 3 or 4 years ago, is when you go in as a guest. You know, in most places you've got a security badge and a print off and you've got to sign something in and all of that. So you go up to the desk and they say, "What's your name?" And you say, "Cathy Brown." And they write Cathy on a sticky label with a smiley face and they pop it on you, because it's not about security, it's about knowing who you are.
Yeah, that's nice.
I just loved that.
Yeah,
that's very nice. One thing kind of related to food and drink that we've also started doing is having local companies come in and showcase their kind of goods. So we had a tea company. I think what else was there? I can't think of another example now, but there was a tea company came in, and then we're trying to expand that up to non-food and drink items. So we were going to have a bike.
Oh,
lost him again.
Just as he gets to the interesting bits as well.
I know.
Well, it's interesting. That speaks to one of the points that I wrote down when I was having a think about it. Was that whole thing about encouraging sort of personal interests and personal projects, and so on, and not just you know, it's all about work and that's it. And I think, you know, we have an advantage because we're a virtual team, and we have volunteers as well as our secondees. We're sort of, I think we're formed almost so that flexible, personal, you know, real life stuff coming into work is just going to naturally happen anyway. But I think, you know, it does create a really engaging environment for us. The fact that you know, we share stuff about your Morris dancing, for example. We've even done some Morris dancing. And I don't know, with things like, I think we were saying when we have calls and we dial in, we've come off the end of the call and before we've gone, "Thanks, girls," you know, or whoever's on the call, everybody, not always good, just girls. Got my washing hung out, you know, washed up while we've been talking, you know, whatever, multitasking stuff that doesn't require thought power. And because we're on the call, we're muted so that we're not annoying everybody, but we jump in and talk when we need to and stuff. And actually, you probably wouldn't say that in most organisations, even if that's what you were doing, because it would, you know, be perceived as not fully focusing on the call, or just inappropriate because you're supposed to be sitting at your desk working hard, sort of thing. And I think for us, that's part of what makes it such an engaging team, is that,
I think so.
You know, we're very flexible.
Sorry, guys.
That's all right. Just as you say profound things, you disappear. But we picked up on what you were saying and said that one of the reasons I think our team works so well is that we let people sort of bring their personality and their personal life into the working environment. So, you know, I was just saying we have calls where we finish a call and say, you know, somebody's managed to do the washing up and somebody else has put their washing away and things like that while we're talking, because you don't have to think about those things, but you can get them done whilst you're muted and not needing to talk, sort of thing. But that in a corporate environment, even if you were doing that working from home, you probably wouldn't tell anybody because it wouldn't be deemed to be working or appropriate. And yet for us, it's part of what makes it work so well, because we all know we've got lives and we're all trying to fit stuff around. And actually, I don't agree with employee engagement definitions talking all the time about discretionary effort, because I think that that really drives that whole more for nothing sort of
absolutely
view, which I don't agree with. But I do think that you get a lot more discretionary effort from people when they've got that flexibility, because there will be times when they're supposed to be working that they're doing things that are for personal reasons, and there'll be times when they're supposed to be doing personal things when they're working, because there's that flexibility. And I think,
absolutely,
that can be really helpful.
One of my most hated phrases is work-life balance, because for me it's all life.
Yes.
It really is. And I find that puts an artificial divide, and it gives us again that view that engagement is something that you do to people. And for me that's entirely wrong. As a leader and as a manager and as everything we do for Engage for Success, it's around engaging with, I suppose, rather than engagement being done to, but really creating an environment in which engagement can happen. And we all have a responsibility to come and be our best selves that we can be on that day. And I think that all adds to it. It's not something that you do to people. It's how you are and how your workplace is.
But I think I completely agree, and I also hate the work-life integration one as well. It's a terrible phrase. Right, I agree with you, Joe. And there's you do need to make that effort to get people's personalities and unique interests in. And in terms of a 2-minute win, I mean, there was something we did a while ago about one fact that people didn't know about you, and it is nice because otherwise you don't get that diversity. And if everyone is kind of seen as the same, then that diversity of thought isn't acceptable, if you know what I mean. You have to show that diversity is acceptable for people to come out of their shell and be like, and speak their mind. And I think, people don't want to be seen as being negative or being like, the kind of killjoy in an organization. But if they feel they have credibility from being unique and telling people about themselves and having achievements other people know about, they don't feel so bad about being honest and about, saying what they really think. So I think it's crucial, really interesting.
Well, one of the questions in the 15.5 is actually, what are you struggling with, or I can't remember what the phrasing is now, which actually does draw out quite a lot of, honesty around being overwhelmed or, feeling a bit sad or, being low energy or whatever. People quite honestly within our team will say those sorts of things, which is really helpful because, we all know that we're not 100% all the time. I mean, Cathy and I are regularly texting each other going, it's a real day sort of thing, and it's really hard to motivate. And it's not because we hate what we're doing or whatever. It's just that sometimes your head feels it. I mean, there's all this stuff, isn't there, about mental health and all that sort of stuff, and how it needs to be much more open about the fact that people have these sorts of difficulties, and a lot of people do, but just don't tell anybody. And I think some of this stuff can really help to open up those sorts of discussions that we all have days that are really difficult, and they're just because our brain's telling us it's going to be difficult, not because actually what's happened is difficult in lots of cases. It's just emotions and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. You can be overwhelmed by a huge workload, or you can be overwhelmed by a small workload, depending on how you feel about it. And no one really talks about that. It's like, if you're overwhelmed, you can't cope.
Absolutely. And of course, you make it worse for yourself because you're saying, well, I should be able to deal with this, and I've dealt with this small amount of workload in the past. And of course, you're not then able to even acknowledge to yourself that the reasoning behind the fact that you for whatever reason, aren't coping at the moment. And it's mostly our environments do not lend themselves towards being open about that sort of thing.
One more quick win as well, I think, is around flexible working. And I see so many stories of companies that introduce flexible working, and they're like, completely flexible here. You can work at home when you need to, if you just give us two weeks notice. And it's kind of that doesn't really,
so flexible.
How do you know you're going to feel bad on that day? It's, there's no trust. It's like, that's the elephant in the room for a policy like that. It's like, we don't really trust you.
My husband's supposed to have not just flexible working. What's it? Flexi time, wasn't it? That sort of old-fashioned sort of style of flexible working. Apparently, it still exists. But I mean, I've known him 14 years now, and his view on it is that people don't like it, and that it doesn't really, in reality, exist. Even though when he needs to take time off or he needs to go into work early and finish work early, he can, and they've never said no ever. But in his head, he thinks that it's not appropriate, and so what that says to me is that the way that people deal with these things, but behind the scenes, is having an impact. So the fact that they never say no sort of means that they say yes, in which case, why does he think that they don't agree with it? So what are people doing and what are people saying that that give him that impression? And, there's so many parts of our, team situations and working situations where there are sort of things behind the scenes that nobody's ever articulated, but everyone sort of thinks. Absolutely. And quite often they're not true.
No. One of the things we find, because obviously we have an ongoing flow of people in and out of Engage for Success as secondees and as volunteers. And of course, they come from all sorts of different backgrounds. Because of the way that we work absolutely a results-oriented working environment. We don't mind when, where, how, what you do, as long as you're getting done what you're doing and you're enjoying it, hopefully, is they take that back then, obviously, into how they interact with their organisations. And in the main, their organisations are really positive because they're coming back generally with a degree of confidence and control that they didn't have before about how they manage themselves. And they're able to sort of quite confidently say, well, I have proven that I can work in this way, and it's quite clear that it's productive and acceptable, that most organisations are actually willing to certainly have the conversation, if not actually change policies. But I think Joe's right, there's a sort of unspoken acceptance, particularly I suspect in larger organisations, that, well, they say that we can do that, but really we'll get into trouble if we do. That might or might not be true.
Well, I think also there's the concept of the kind of debt you have to pay back if you're flexible working. People feel like they take a day off and then they have to over deliver to make up for the fact, which is ridiculous. But it's also like in meetings, when someone's talking and you realise you jump and you're like, oh, I'm in a meeting, I should be contributing, and then within 30 seconds you feel the need to contribute, even if it's a terrible point. People go through these. I mean, these are minor elephants in the room, in everyday in working life. But I think the flexible working debt thing is, it's FaceTime, isn't it? And kind of linked presenteasm.
Yeah, and that is so hard to manage. Again, thinking about my husband's example, if I need him to come home half an hour early, he'll be all like, oh, what do I need? Right, okay, when do I need to go in and everything else? And yet he never leaves work on time. So where does all that extra 10 minutes, quarter of an hour, half an hour, an hour? He works from home quite often in his spare time. How does that all play into his flexible piece? Because it doesn't in his head, because he thinks he has to formally say, right, I'm coming in at 8 o'clock so I can leave at 4 o'clock sort of thing. And I think that happens a lot, doesn't it? That people give a lot more and, they sort of don't measure it. And then when they need time back, they feel like they've got to go and, swap the time for something sort of thing. And actually, that's sort of the point of flexible working is exactly what Cathy says. If you've got outcomes and stuff that you're supposed to be doing, as long as you're doing it, actually how you get to that shouldn't be the issue. But that isn't quite often the case, is it? And it's in people's heads as much as it is in managers. It's not saying that managers and companies are getting it wrong. It's actually people don't sort of have that right mindset as well, which is interesting.
Well, I always think that engagement and how we behave at work is a two-way street anyway. I mean, this is back to it not being something that's done to us. It's something that we're all part of.
Well, that's a 2-minute win, I think, as well. Like talking to employees around what engagement actually is, because once it starts, it isn't something.
Oh, baby.
Oh, that's a good point as well, by the sound of it. We'll come back to that when he comes back. Oh, dear. I mean, we do talk about that from just engagement generally point of view, don't we? That it's sort of employees demanding, if you like, better engagement practices and atmosphere within the organisation as much as it is, managers doing something different sort of thing. And so, hello.
I'm getting filled with rage. Absolutely rage. I keep slowing my hand down every time that happens. Sorry, guys.
So start again. It was a really interesting point about employees and their perspective on engagement.
Yes. Just that you talk to someone, and once HR says we're doing engagement, then it automatically becomes something that's done to people. Whereas I think you can start it out very easily from a coaching perspective in what do you like to do? If once you find out what type of person someone is and you empower a line manager to reward them and recognize them, you get paid. It isn't rocket science, but it's the place you start from, I think. And you can do that in a 2-minute conversation. You know, what do you need?
Yeah.
Well, I like working from home. Well, you know, work from home. You know, what difference does it make, really?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, an even quicker fix than that, and it's my top tip. Whenever anybody says, right, top tip for better engagement, it applies at every level. It applies to you and your peers, to you and your boss, to your boss and you, all the way. It's just think about saying thank you more often. It's really, really simple. And we lose basic politeness in a workplace sometimes, and just thanking people for, not for a great job, for their job, for being there, for just, you know, getting on with stuff and doing stuff. It's really, really, really engaging.
I agree. And for effort as well, because I think, you know, results-based environments, which everyone's moving towards, there can be a tendency to be, you know, you thank people when stuff goes right, but you got to thank people for effort, haven't you?
It's interesting you saying that as well, because it just reminded me of another thought I had before we started around how much of it, and I noticed this at the conference, how much of the emphasis with organisations and suppliers on employee engagement is around recognition, and it's important, exactly as you say, Cathy. Thank yous and recognition is really important, an important part of employee engagement, but it's lumped into that department, if you like. So quite a lot of people you speak to, you say about employee engagement, and they start going, oh yes, we do have a recognition, you know, program or whatever, and you're like, no, I don't just mean recognition. There are lots of other elements of engagement. It's not just about recognition, because if it was, it would be called recognition, funny enough.
You're right. And also, I mean, it is becoming confused, and I think also it needs to be clear what you recognize as an organization as well, what's important to you, which could show, you know, I mean, it's kind of linked to the values, and, you know, if you're an organization that has a no blame culture, that is, you know, innovates and experiments, then you're more likely and should probably over prioritize thanking of effort, because, you know, that's the way you innovate, by people taking risks. And then perhaps if you're a more conservative one, you know, I just think it kind of changes. People think recognition straight away is all about constant messages and reinforcements, but the same message applied to everyone. And the problem with that is, you know, a gift, for example, is worth a great deal the first time, less the second time, and then over time people become resentful over a gift. I mean, that's the reality we live in, you know. So
I mean, far more bespoke looking at what those rewards can be is good. So where you've got, if you're using the system or whatever else, which actually allows you to let Julie go at 3:00 on a Friday 3 weeks running, because you know that she picks her kids up from school, and being able to tailor rewards in that way. And again, that implies some knowledge of the people that work for you
it's
as
sort
well.
of recognition of somebody, not a recognition. It's, you know, it's of their challenges and stuff. It just reminds me of it reminds me of somebody we met at actually at a recognition exhibition, where he worked for an organisation where they did they made plastic cards, like credit cards, and they did loyalty cards and credit cards. And there's an organisation in the marketing side of things, not the manufacturing. They decided that it was much more profitable to do one over the other, and I can't remember which way round it was. And they made that decision, and that was fine, and it was going really well. And then he bumped into somebody from manufacturing, and just said, "How's it going?" And he said, "Oh, you know, it's okay. Everyone's, you know, okay, but it's a bit, you know, of an issue at the moment, isn't it? The business." He said, "What do you mean?" And they had a conversation. It turns out that everyone in the manufacturing side, because they were creating less volume, which was more profitable, but they didn't know that, they thought that the business was going through some difficulties, because nobody had actually explained to them or engaged them in the discussion about the strategic direction of the organisation. And that is a prime example. It's nothing to do with recognition. They didn't need to go and say to them, you're great, guys, we need you to do less, or anything like that. What they needed to do was go and just talk to them about the business and enable them to understand what the if you like, the strategic narrative part of the organisation was, and then everybody would have been working to it, knowing that it was a good thing, rather than half the organisation thinking it was a bad thing. So I thought I'd always use that as quite a good example of just poor communication causing issues with engagement as well.
Yeah, it's a really good example. I think that there should be a concept that if you're an employee, unless you're told about the strategic narrative of the organization, and unless you're brought into the financials and the marketplace, you understand that, you kind of think the organization has endless walls that it become, it's just huge, and it just, there's no like end to it. And so that makes you really resentful, because you overestimate how many resources they've got, and you ignore the constraints that companies work under. So you have to keep people, this is the wrong phrase, but you keep people so they can see the sides of the box, because otherwise, like, people get so annoyed when, with leadership, when they think leadership is so empowered to change stuff. So absolutely, I think strategic narrative and making sure people understand the precise environment the company is working under, is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, which then becomes the whole integrity piece, doesn't it? So
yeah.
So guys, it's coming up to the hour. I know Cathy's got to go off on a call anyway, and we probably don't want to keep going on waffling for. Although we could. As I said to Jamie, I'd set this to start at 11 p.m. by accident, so we could have just carried on till midnight, but we won't. So thanks for joining in. I've really enjoyed it, and
me too.
I think we should do another one. Shall we do another one sometime?
I agree. Let's do another one. Yeah, and I'm going to get a wired internet connection that time.
Yes, exactly. We'll do another one where Jamie's with us for the whole thing, shall we, Cathy?
Yeah, rather than just keep dropping out.
And I'm on.
Brilliant. So thank you so much, and we'll catch you next time. If anyone's interested, our website is engageforsuccess.org, and there's lots of resources on there that you can use, and places to find us and things to do and all that sort of thing. And Jamie, you're at? Is at HRZone.com, where there's blogs, articles, content, whatever you need. Just take a look. Cool. And we'll catch you next time. Great. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.